Still getting hot out there, or is it? It's beautiful. It's now. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody. I want to thank all of you for taking some time out here to meet the candidates here, for them to get to meet you. I'd like to thank all the candidates here on the panel for taking some time out of their campaigns to come and meet the constituents here. I'd like to thank the IBEW for hosting the event. My name is Heather Nesbitt. I'm going to be the moderator today. I'd like to go down the panel and introduce all of the candidates from left to right. So Chris Miller, we're going to start from the 12th district.
Welcome everybody, my name's Chris Miller. I'm originally from Roxana, I'm living in Alton now, and I just got to say this is a beautiful sight. 100 people get together on a Saturday afternoon, organically coming together, right, to advance democracy. It's a beautiful thing. And I'll say also that seeing this many candidates up here in districts that in past years we've had a hard time finding one person to step up and get into the arena, I think we all deserve a round of applause. My background's in entrepreneurship, community organizing. Now I serve as a professor of entrepreneurship across the river at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Really, most of my work and my interest in representing you is based on the fact that I think change is needed, and I think entrepreneurship and innovation are the vehicles for change. I think I've got the experience and the expertise to be able to take those dreams and put them into reality. I'll be honest with you though, the problem's not in this room, right? The problem's not up here. And so I'm quite sure that we know what our next tasks are ahead of us, but I guess my community organizing message to you is, what's next for you? What are you going to do after you leave here? How can you get involved? Individually and collectively, we are going to take back the 12th congressional district. We're going to reclaim the 13th district. And with God on our side, we're going to liberate the good people of the 15th congressional district. Thank you, and I look forward to working with all of you.
All right, Adam King.
Hello, my name is Adam King. I'm also from Alton, so we have neighbors over here. I went to school for my bachelor's degree in political science. I am a glutton for punishment, so I went back for a master's in geography with an emphasis in geopolitics. And while completing that degree, I did a second master's degree in peace and conflict studies. I spent 2 years working at the National Archives and Records Administration in Spanish Lake, assisting veterans with getting their documents in order to go and get their benefits that they rightfully deserve. And it was one of the most gratifying jobs I've ever had. And unfortunately, I had to leave it. You're not able to run for a partisan political office and work in an executive level agency. So I am back catering at a bar. So I am a bartender. So anyone feeling excited after this, you're more than welcome to come down and see us. And just to piggyback on what has already been said, I would like to thank all the candidates for being here, and I would also like to thank them all for stepping up. This is not easy to do, to stand up here in front of people, share your ideas, and it can be very frightening and intimidating. And I'm very happy that we have a crowd out here who is friendly and welcoming, and we're all moving towards the same goal, which is, as we've said, to bring these districts back into our fold and really try to advance democracy and make the lives better for the people of Southern Illinois.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the organizers of this event for putting this on. I want to thank the folks at Organized Labor here at IBEW who are willing to let us come into their building and host something like this so we can get the message out and also hear from you. I'm sure some of you have seen my big fat Irish face on TV or in the newspaper from time to time in my job as the state's attorney here in St. Clair County, dealing with the responsibilities of protecting public safety, but also making sure we treat people justly and fairly in our criminal justice system. And before that, before I was a prosecutor, I served in the United States Navy, and I was very fortunate to be able to go all around the world, see most of the world, and even having done that, this place and this country still means so much to me. This is the greatest country in the world. No one debate that. There's no doubt about that. And this community here in Southern Illinois, where I came here over 30 years ago, because my mother and father were transferred to Scott Air Force Base, you and all the people that are here are the reason I'm doing this. And I think as I've gone around to all the 12 counties that are in the 12th congressional district, what you hear from folks is that folks that are candidates, but as well as people that are serving in public office, they are not listening. They have voted for change over and over and over again. And the folks that are putting in office, they are still not listening to what people are saying. And so this is less an opportunity for me to talk at you and more of an opportunity for me to listen to you. And so I appreciate the time to be able to do that. I am very proud of all these guys that are up here. It does take something to get out there and run for public office. The first thing I ever ran for was school board, because the teachers union wanted me to run for the school board. I didn't ever think I'd have the opportunity to run for the United States Congress. But at this point in my life and the life of this country, I feel like I don't have a choice. We have to step up. We have to step up. Or the country that we have believed in for the past 200 years, it will not be the country that we believe in. It will be something else. But that's not going to happen. We're going to do it here, right here in the 12th, and in all these congressional districts here in Southern Illinois. So I appreciate the time, and let's fight the good fight this time. This time we're going to win.
I'd like to thank you all for coming and the organization for hosting, the IBEW for hosting. We're all here for the same reason, so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Pat McMahon. I come from Mascoutah. I grew up in Effingham, which is a different district, but it's close enough to Mount Vernon that we hear a lot of their problems too. But I spent 31 years in the Postal Service, 20 as a postmaster. I came to Mascoutah and I retired 5 years ago. I started volunteering in the community with the Improvement Association that runs the homecoming and such. We have the biggest one around, by the way. And I do that. So after I retired, I got bored besides volunteering, so I started selling real estate. So I've been doing that. Kind of got bored with that. So here I am, and I'm just here to affect change because everybody here knows that change is needed. And as Brendan said, people aren't listening out there. So that's why we're all here. I've been on city council for 6 years. And you know, at the local level, it's like this times 20 because everybody knows everybody and they feel free to say what they want. I wish it was like that district-wide, because then you hear exactly what people have to say and they don't have any reason not to tell you that, because they will. So I'm used to hearing the local things, so that's what I'm here for, is to affect change. And I know all these guys are here for the same reason, to bring back the 12th. So that's what we're hoping to do. Thank you.
My name's Dean Pruitt. I want to make a plug for the Monroe County Democrats. They're down tonight selling hamburgers at the Monroe County homecoming, at the Waterloo homecoming. So if you come down there, I'll get some hamburgers. I am one of the founders and co-founders and builders of City Museum. I retired from there when my partner was killed. I have 2 kids in college, so I can either do this or flip hamburgers, which I'm doing practicing tonight, or I can sell a kidney. They asked us to rise up. When Trump came into office, they asked us to rise up. We all pretty much rose up, and we're all doing this because we really probably don't sleep very well at night. You all probably don't sleep very well at night. And so each one of us is going to ask you to support one of us or fall in line behind one of us to fight the good fight. And that's really your decision, but you've got to pretty much take what we say and digest it and see who represents your thoughts and who represents what your heart thinks. But I think we're all pretty much in a line that what's going on in Washington is nothing we can be proud of. It sickens you. It's not us. And regardless of your party affiliation, why are we sending our 3rd string to the World Series? We're a 2-party system. Why aren't we sending our very best to Washington? So I'm asking you to listen to our comments, and some of us may come across with different ideas, and some of us may be more left. I still have concerns about whether we should let the Irish run for public office. Multiculturalism, you see from my shirt here, it says, Grüßen Sie mich, ich bin Deutsche. So, kiss me, I'm German, if anybody, I mean.
Hi, my name is David Beckett. I'm from the 12th District as well, born and raised in Columbia, Illinois. I want to thank everybody for being here. I think this speaks volumes for what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the increased participation is motivating for all of us. And I think when we look at what we need to do and how much we need to do, it makes it a lot easier knowing you're there with us, and that when we're fighting for you, that you are supporting us. I also want to shout out to the younger generation that's showing up. I was just talking to 3 college students that are sitting there in the middle. And this is a big deal because as candidates, we go throughout the district, and oftentimes we see the backbone of a lot of the Democratic Party is baby boomers. And it's really refreshing to see this 18 to 40-year-old culture in politics and starting to get involved, because a lot of the issues, or most of the issues that we talk about and deal with, are going to affect them, and that's very important. And I want to close, just the introduction. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Went to SIUE. I'm also a social entrepreneur. Sorry, Chris, didn't mean to steal your thunder on that expertise area. I'm closely connected with Armenia because my wife's Armenian. We're a multicultural family. We speak 3 languages at home, with English falling somewhere in the top 2. It depends on what the kids are grasping onto. And we really, one of the reasons I'm here is because I believe that it's time that you guys get representation that understands what it's like to be in your shoes, what it's like to have mountains of college debt, what it's like to face financial ruin when you don't have adequate healthcare insurance, which my wife and I have faced, what it's like to raise a family on a limited budget. I've been a philanthropist, I've been in business, but I've also always been middle class, and I've been proud to be middle class. And I think it's time that we stop sending people to Congress that say they know what it's like to be in your shoes, but they don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. I'm ready to take that challenge, and I'm ready to fight for you because I understand what it's like to be in your shoes. I'm not going to promise to fight for the little man, because I am the little man. I just know how to fight. So, thank you.
Shifting over now to Illinois 13, my name is Dr. David Gill, and I'm a physician in emergency medicine and family practice, and I live up in McLean County in Bloomington with my wife Elaine. We have 3 sons and 3 daughters, and 2 cats, and 2 rescue dogs, and a pair of turtles named Anakin and Padme. I consider myself a bold progressive. I've been a member of a group called Physicians for a National Health Program for 25 years. That's a group of doctors advocating. I'm a 20-year member of a group called Physicians for Reproductive Choice, and a card-carrying 24-year member of the American Civil Liberties Union. This is a time of great crisis with the man occupying the White House. I don't have to inform anybody that this is a guy who stands against such fundamental American principles as freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of the press and the need for an independent judiciary. And we've got a guy in 13 in Rodney Davis who not only is he wrong on all the issues, but he stands beside this president who's tearing apart the very fabric of our democracy. And Rodney Davis really needs to be defeated as part of a taking over as a new House Democratic majority, and I feel that I know how to defeat Rodney Davis. I ran once before for this same seat back in 2012 and came within 0.3 of 1 percentage point of winning. And it's a tough district. It was an extra tough year. In years that end in 2, you can have an independent relatively easily on the ballot, and we had one, and he was just as liberal as myself with regards to climate change and gay marriage and so on and so forth. So I've sat on the sidelines for a couple of cycles, but given the fact that Rodney has to go so that we can have a Congress that serves as a check against this president, I felt it my duty to get back into this thing. And I want to thank everyone for being here and for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Hi everybody, my name is Eric Jones and I'm also running for Congress in the 13th District. And first I want to say thank you to IBEW and to Indivisible and for all of you for being here today. I think it's just a really great sign that we have people who are willing to spend their Saturday listen to a bunch of people talk up on a dais about politics. We're in some tough times right now, but I think with where things are headed, I think our best days are ahead of us. We're going to have to fight for them. So I want to give a little bit about my background and why I'm running this race too. So I was born and raised in Centralia, and I now live in Edwardsville. I'm married and have 2 young sons, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And growing up, my mom was a school teacher for 30 years. She's now retired. And my dad is a small business owner that he's still working to this day in Centralia and Salem. And when I say small, sometimes people say small business and you find out it's like a $50 million business. That's not what this is. It's a small business with about 5 employees. And he's worked hard his whole life, and my mom did too, to help my brother and I have opportunity. They worked their whole lives to make sure we could go to college and pursue our dreams. And what I'm seeing right now in this country is that dream is getting harder. The opportunity for people in the middle class is getting harder, and there's people being squeezed, and we're also seeing workers being put through a harder and harder time. And I think the reason for that is that we have people in Washington right now who are working for special interests, for corporate interests, and are not working on behalf of the people. And I think that's the underlying problem that we have right now in this country. And until we solve those issues, I think we're going to continue facing the problems that we have right now. And I think the best example that we've seen right now on that is the fact that Representative Davis voted for a health care bill that would take away health care from millions of people, including thousands in this district. And in all the districts we're dealing with here, would hurt rural hospitals and would drive costs up for everybody. Now, if it's going to hurt all the people in the district, and he's going to choose to vote on this bill, why would he do that? Well, it's going to help insurance companies. And if you look at what he's been doing on every issue, he's siding with the special interests instead of siding with the people. And what I've been doing my whole career is fighting on behalf of people. So I've served as an assistant attorney general here in Illinois, where I took on big banks, took on cable companies, took on telecommunications companies, took on companies that were hurting students who were trying to repay their student loans, but they were making it hard for them because it was more profitable for them. And I also served as a chief investigative counsel in the United States Senate and as an investigative counsel in the United States House. And in those roles, I took on special interests and I took on an administration that wasn't listening to people. I investigated the Bush administration for politicization of science issues when they were editing reports that were scientists found about climate change, and oil executives were changing them. I also investigated and uncovered that the Bush administration was sending trailers down to victims of Hurricane Katrina that had high levels of formaldehyde in them. And they didn't do that work. They didn't do anything about it because they were afraid of getting sued. And I'm mentioning all of that because we need people in Washington who understand what the fight is about and who understand how to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And so I'm happy to put my record up against Rodney Davis's on what I've been doing versus what he's been doing. And I just want to close on the fact that I genuinely believe that our best days can be ahead of us, but we just have to fight for them. And we have to send people to Washington who know how to do it. So thanks for your time.
Hi there, my name is Benjamin Webb, and I'm a high school English instructor from Normal, Illinois, originally from Rockford, Illinois, and we just started school last week. And so I'm already getting ready for papers and everything coming in. I think what you've been hearing from all of us is really kind of the message that we really want you to walk home and walk out of this door with, is that we have a number of normal individuals. I'm from Normal, so I can make that joke. You have a number of individuals, whether physicians, lawyers, everyday normal people standing up against an administration that we know to be wrong. And we are standing up and going to those around us and saying, we are better than this. And part of the reason why I'm engaging in this conversation in this district is because we have a representative who is choosing not to listen. Anybody who goes to his office hours, if they take off work to go and talk to him, or if they can afford to have a town hall with him, they will sit down and say that the person is in the chair, but they're not listening. And they're not willing to learn from them. And so as an educator, one of the things that I want to bring to the table is level of dialogue, especially in the 13th, which is very divided, especially in Dr. Gill's year coming very close. We have a number of elections where we are surrounded by individuals who disagree with us. And we need to be able to have a conversation with those that disagree with us and potentially educate them and inform them why the alternative facts aren't good enough. Why everything that is being presented by this administration is wrong and why we shouldn't stand for it. And so I'm really excited to engage in that conversation and really learn from all of you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Again, my name is Heather Nesbitt. I'm going to moderate today's meeting. And before we open the floor for questions, I want to go over some of the ground rules. And so the ground rules are is that my goal is that we want to make sure that as many voices as possible are heard. So please limit your questions to one relevant question that is framed well, and so that the candidates can answer thoroughly, but can answer your question. Also, constituents. Oh, I'm sorry, I just put that. Panel questions are limited to 3 minutes for the initial response. And so we have somebody in the back here. Is that Chris? Hi. Hi. We're going to do, I'm sorry, we're going to do a 1-minute warning and a 30-second warning. So the 1 minute is which color? Okay, that's your green. And then your 30-second warning is the red. All right.
Do I start doing this?
And I also have a gavel up here. Don't make me use it. And finally, candidates are encouraged to interact with each other as part of the conversation, as long as we stay on topic, as long as no one candidate dominates and civility is maintained throughout. All right, everybody's phone's on silent, and if you can want to form a line behind the podium there, we can get this started.
Is there a microphone or can you, no microphone?
There is no.
Just discussing that. Just go ahead and address your question.
Oh, okay. My name's Pam Gronemeyer, and I'm a physician in the 13th. And I know Dr. Gill because we supported Dr. Gill when he ran. I want to tell you, you do have a kumbaya moment when you go in to see Rodney Davis. Because yesterday I went to see him in Litchfield, and he was too happy to see me because he knows me. No, I mean he was. But I basically went partially because I'm a member of PDA, to give him our ideas for the Summer of Progress, which are 12 bills that would like him to sponsor. Well, he took it and moved it over to the side, because I know he's not going to do that. But I also went to talk to him about money and politics, because we're also part of Move to Amend. In 2014, we had a ballot initiative in Edwardsville Township where we said corporations aren't people and money isn't speech. That was my group that got on the ballot, and it won by 77%. Well, the Move to Amend people have now they're trying to find a Republican to get behind an amendment proposal to support getting the money out of politics. And in 2012, when he ran against you, David, we have a recording of him on the radio saying that he wanted to get money out of politics. So I played the recording, and and I also gave him the bills that are there, and he said they're working on their own bill. So, but I just would like to know what you guys think about getting the money out of politics. And I mean, we think corporations shouldn't be considered people, and that money shouldn't be free speech. And that's what, so we're like a pledge to amend from people.
Okay, gentlemen, who would like to answer first? So we'll go with, and then go with next.
I will tell you, as I've gone around my district, I'm not in 13th. I'm sure the fellows from the 13th would like having something to say about this. As I've done this, it has become clear to me, any of the challenges that we have, any of the solutions to those problems are stymied, and we're not able to make progress because of this trench warfare that we have between either ends of the political spectrum. And that is entirely driven by the money in politics. Our democracy has been mutated into something that it was not intended to be. And there's many things we have to work on. There's many issues, infrastructure, jobs that have good wages. It's a long, long list of things that we need to get done in this country. But we will not make real progress in any of those issues because of the way our system is set up now and the influence of money in politics. So people are going to have to show a little courage. They're going to have to step out there. And before I do that and worked on any other issue, the first thing I would do when I'm elected to Congress is to find other Democrats, Republicans, anybody who is willing to join in sponsoring that constitutional amendment. That has to be the first thing we have to do. It is tearing this country apart.
So I think it's a great question, and I think you're right on point. I'm actually glad it's the first question that was asked today. I think Citizens United, which has allowed dark money to infiltrate our politics, is one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has ever made. So that needs to be overturned. And I just want to make a point about what I've seen in the roles that I've played, as an Assistant Attorney General and as an investigative counsel in Congress. So, I spent about a year working on a bill in Illinois where banks were forcing workers to swallow these ridiculous fees for just accessing their pay, because Illinois had never considered something called a payroll card, which was a new type of paycheck. Instead of getting a check or having direct deposit, if you were unbanked, they would give you these payroll cards, which were basically debit cards. And we found out that it was charging people $2 or $1 or 50 cents every time they made a purchase or try to get money off the card. And a lot of the people affected were hourly workers. So that adds up very quickly into the amount of money they're making. And for me, one of the eye-opening experiences in that was, I was working for the Illinois Attorney General's office. We were down in Springfield. We were up in Springfield from here, and we were working to get this bill passed. And it was me, and it was not just somebody else from the AG's office. It was a few representatives from the unions, and we had some sort of grassroots organizations helping us. And after one of the hearings that we had, there was just the 4 of us or 5 of us, and across the hall, as everyone was meeting, there were probably 25 lobbyists from banks, all talking about how they were going to kill this legislation. And so I think the corporations are doing just fine. They have all the representation they need, and we don't need to give them any more access to our politicians, and the best thing we can do is take that money out of politics. So I agree completely.
I just want to add to this, because I think we all agree on this subject. It's vastly important that we get money out of politics. But I also want to share with you a little experience that I'm sure many of us have faced. I have a stack at home of PAC applications and special interest applications for money and for obviously endorsements. And we made it a point at the beginning of our campaign that we said we're staying away from this. Even if I believe in that cause or that PAC's cause, we're staying away from it. We're staying away from it because we need to take back the money in politics and put it in your hands. Right? I should be getting money from, we as candidates should be getting money and support from you, not from a PAC, because you are the ones voting, not the PAC, right? And we can go into the details of why shutting down PACs and why shutting down money in politics is important, but the real essence is it's not democratic. It's not a democratic process of having PACs put money into. The democratic process is you volunteering for the campaign or you putting $3 to $5 into the campaign. And really that's how we're going to change this, is obviously through legislation and shutting it down, but also by putting the power back in your hands as the voters and as the supporters inside the constituency.
So if you look over here, there's CAT and UPS and AT&T. Those should be your faces, not their name brands on there. You should not, the rich and corporations should not be able to buy your representation. Your representatives should be there for you, for your causes, for what you need. And I completely agree, David, I think you had said about the PACs. Our campaign has made a pledge. We're not going to take money from PACs, from super PACs, from large corporations. We will work with small businesses and we will work with individuals because that's the way representation should be.
Pam, I signed the Move to Amend pledge back in 2012. I still honor that signature, and it's a part of my stump speech when I say that corporations are not people and money is not speech. The problem really predates Citizens United even, and I've been a long time, for many years, supporter of publicly financed campaigns in this country. I think when we finally take that step, it'll be a significant step toward making this a real democracy here in America. And one final comment I would add is that, sadly, this is something that impacts both of our major political parties. I would never equate the Republicans with the Democrats, but the Democrats also take all kinds of corporate money, and it impacts policy when it comes when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to moving against climate change, when it comes to education, the list goes on. And so I'm proud that my campaign doesn't take any of that nasty money. I call lots and lots of individual little people.
In the last election cycle, my boss spent $20 per vote to win. So I think we can actually bolster the post office and just have him mail that money directly to you. Or if you want $1 million votes, he can send you $1 million. Or the old St. Clair County adage, vote early, vote often. Chicago. Well, it's not Chicago. 1776 was the most incredible experiment in human history. You had the confluence of the end of colonialism. You had the confluence of Adam Locke. You had the confluence of the Revolution and all our great heroes of the Revolution. And they came together with one of the most noble ideas in history. And that has been hijacked by Wall Street, and by money, and by the Koch brothers, so they can sell more doodads, or so they can kill the planet, or so they can make you suffer in your old age. That's dead wrong, period. End of discussion.
Bernie did it with $27 per person, not per company. So I think we learned.
We'll keep that going. We'll keep that going. Before we go any further, since we've gotten to know just a little bit so far of the candidates that are here, I'd like to mention there is a candidate that is not here today, but she sends her regards, and her name is Betsy Dirksen Londrigan. She is running for the 13th. If anybody has any questions, her manager back there, Kate Martucci, yes? Yes. Okay. And you can find her website at betsydirksenlondrigan.com. It's a mouthful, but I'm sure you'll be able to find it. All right. So thank you very much for coming and directing people here toward her and her stances. Okay, so next question, please.
Okay. My question is just one in a series of 7 that I'll be asking Mr. Bost on Monday whenever I meet with him. But it is, now that we've seen presidents from 2 different parties in 3 different administrations misuse the 2001 authorization for use of military force, or AUMF, do you support Representative Barbara Lee's efforts to repeal this? And I'm Matt from the 12th District, by the way.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go with either Chris or you hasn't answered yet. Yes? Okay.
As somebody who's trying to be your representative in the U.S. House of Reps, I firmly believe in the powers that have been vested in the Congress, and I do think that while the president needs to be able to make the decisions in real time, the Congress has a constitutional obligation to make sure that it's also exercising its rights. It has gone too far, and there are clear examples where I think the Congress did not do its job, and I can assure you that with all the facts on the table, that I will represent you and represent what is invested in this country. But I can't make a pledge on any single, it's completely conditional, right? And the things that are going on in this world, our president needs to have the ability to respond as necessary.
Yeah, I agree completely, and the job of the representatives, the Congress, is to approve the act of war, and the president needs that leeway, but that's why that's there, so that check and balance is there, so somebody like Mr. Trump doesn't just jump in and do something stupid, and we know that's gonna happen. So hopefully the Congress will do their job while they're there now and stop that. I don't have faith in that, but I hope they will, so I'll leave it at that.
And thank you for the question. The big concern that I have is the person sitting in the Oval Office is exhibited on countless numbers of occasions, even before he was in the Oval Office, and how unfit he is to serve. And my biggest concern is, especially with most recent news about the trans ban and everything else he does to undermine the due process, the procedures that have been set up over the course of this nation's creation, I'm concerned about what decisions he would make.
And so I do support Congress and their ability to enact legislation, declarations of war as well. But right now I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the person in the chair. And so I think part of what this group of individuals up here is really trying to do is we are really trying to flip our districts because we cannot allow certain things to continue. And right now we keep getting more and more evidence that this man is unfit.
I admire Barbara Lee. I think she's correct and very brave. And yeah, I certainly agree with her. And I think that this ties back in with the very first question too. I think that we have a Congress that has abdicated its responsibilities and sits on its hands because it takes a whole lot of money from arms manufacturers and is paid to be very quiet and let these wars continue ad infinitum.
I want to add to that. I think the principle behind this question is the fact that we have to look at our military in the progression of military, especially with drones. And it's a very important question. It's a very important issue. As a Marine, I came up in an era when the drones were just getting started. And now we're seeing that, during Obama's era, we dropped more bombs during that era than we did with Bush. And unfortunately, that occurs because of drones. And we need legislation and laws that move with the time. When we have technology like drones, well, then we need laws that are going to restrict the use of drones and drone warfare so that the president cannot just on a daily basis drop bombs because he has this modern technology. I think the drone subject is going to be the driving factor behind this type of legislation.
My brother-in-law is still in the Navy. My sister just got out of the Navy. She went to the Naval Academy. I was in the Navy. I still have friends, family, other folks that are serving in our armed forces. My mother and father, we were living over in what was then West Germany because of the threat of the Soviet Union. We were stationed over there, and then we came to Scott Air Force Base. And I do think our commander-in-chief certainly needs the flexibility he or she needs to be able to protect the country. But as Dr. Gill said, this is yet another example of how the flood of money into our politics that began 20 years ago, coincidentally, is the same time where our foreign policy went off the rails. And I blame both parties. We should all blame both parties for the circumstances that we find ourselves in. How is a congressman or a congresswoman, any representative in our House or in the Senate, how are they going to be able to provide the deep technical oversight that is needed to pay attention to these policy changes and these very complicated issues that affect our military, that affect our foreign policy, if they are on the phone most of the time in the boiler room making calls for donations? How are they going to be able to do their job in terms of oversight of Homeland Security policy? How are they going to be able to oversee what's being done in our State Department? How are they going to make sure that our military, as amazing as they are used wisely and judiciously and effectively to protect the things that we believe in, our democracy? We can't under the current circumstances. And our foreign policy has been infected by that problem as much as any of our problems here in this country. So I don't know the specifics of the bill that you're talking about, but I think we all agree that this is something that is important.
Always wanted to do it.
Thank you. In the history of our country, there has been an ebb and flow between the power of the executive branch and the power of the legislature. And we are living through a time right now that's been going on for a few administrations where the power has really shifted to the executive branch. And I think that's actually hurt our country in a lot of ways in the manner in which you're describing it when it comes to acts of war and authorizations. And what we're seeing in Washington is a lot of these members, they don't want to take this vote. They don't want to do it
They want it to just keep going on and on without that having to intervene because they're afraid of accountability. And the biggest problem we have in politics right now is that we have members of Congress who aren't willing to be accountable for what they're supposed to be doing there. And so, I think there should be a vote. I think that they should have to vote on whether or not we want to do this. They should be doing it every couple of years. Because there are members of Congress who have been pushing for this because it's very important. We can't have forever wars that just you vote on something and then you just get to, the president can do whatever they want for a long time. Now at the same time, I do acknowledge that the presidency has to have the flexibility to do the job. And the military commanders all down the chain. But at the same time, when it comes to broad decisions, and that was a big one in 2001, we need to reevaluate that, and the members of Congress need to be voting on it. So good question. Thanks for it.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marcia Campbell, and while I live in the 12th District, I am the president of the Southwestern Illinois Democratic Women, and we have members in the 12th and the 13th, and maybe even some in the 15th, I think. So, the question I'm going to ask you about is jobs. Now, I don't know a politician in this day and age who won't tell you they're all for doing something about jobs. Everybody's going to do something about jobs. Well, for my 2 cents worth, a lot of our problem with jobs is that we went from an economy that made things to a service economy. And now we've got people making minimum wage, trying to piece together a living, trying to support their family. At the same time, we have a skills gap because we had a generation of kids that were pushed to go to college. They maybe didn't know what they wanted to do when they got there. They needed to go to college. That was what everybody did. So now we have this generation in debt up to their ears. The federal government isn't necessarily wanting to be helpful because the banks are making money, the government's making money. Meanwhile, we got businesses that are complaining that they can't find workers with the right skills. So I'd like to hear from you. What are you going to do to help with that gap, to create programs that use our high school systems and our community college systems to retrain workers so that they can support? Everybody just wants to support their family. I personally don't know anybody that wants to be on the public dole. I don't. Everybody I know wants to have a job, have money to support their family, take vacations, all that stuff. So I'd like to hear what your plans are for helping to close that skill gap, get some worker training programs going through a variety of avenues that we have available to us. And, sitting in this IBEW hall, talking to kids in high school about the trades and that they can make a good living and support their family in the trades. And I'll go sit down while you answer.
I spoke to the Union County Democrats back in the summer, and they have a problem that's similar to most of the high schools in Southern Illinois, and this is probably because we haven't managed to skin the honor and nail into the barn door yet. They don't have auto shop. They don't have machine shop. They don't have woodcraft shop. They don't have building skills shop. They don't have anything where these kids can do something besides go to college and maybe become a CPA or something like that. These kids don't know a Phillips head from a flathead. And then you can't understand why a machine shop won't take them, or they can't weld, or they don't know how to solder, they don't know how to braze, they don't know the difference between copper wire or aluminum wire. How can they go out into the world? They think electricity comes from that switch on the wall, or they think corn comes from the frozen food section. So we have a generation of students that are very good digitally. I have 2 of them in my house, and they have very good thumbs, but they're pretty clueless about what an adjustable wrench is. And if we don't address that at the high school level, if we don't take kids and grab them from the earliest age and say, it's okay to be a backhoe operator, and explain to them that not only that, a machinist makes $80,000 a year. A journeyman machinist makes $80,000 a year. It's better than a teacher makes. That's not a bad wage.
I would advocate, let me just back up and support my local school district, because they actually have a lot of those programs in the school in its district at 19, so they do really well at that. So I believe in training in renewables, solar, wind, promote those kinds of things in the schools. And that leads us back to why we're all here, because if we don't make a change, that absolutely will not happen. They just don't believe in it. It'll either cost them too much money, or they won't make as much money. Anyway, that's would be the best place to start the training in the high schools, and for people who are out of work and who've not been in work for quite a while. There's a lot of them out there. We can make some training programs for those guys too. So that's my efforts.
We're going to go this way first.
It's a great question, and I think it's a two-tiered question. So I think on one side it's about education, and then on another side it's about job creation. And right now, obviously, we've seen that our education system and the standard of our education system, especially for college level and trade school, is being gutted. We've got Davos, who has basically created a war on education. And this is one of the areas that we have to focus on, is how do we bring back affordable education for people in this district, and specifically, how do we bring about the right education? Because not everybody should be getting a bachelor's degree. Some people should be getting a trade school degree or whatever their technical degree. And another, on the opposite side, is how do we attract these biotech, clean tech, and renewable jobs? Well, we have to build programs to incentivize companies to come. And one of the things I talked with a few congressmen about is creating a program in coal counties that would incentivize companies to bring those types of jobs and then retool and retrain local workers so that they can have better jobs, they can have higher paying jobs and healthier jobs. So I think that's a concrete step that we have to take.
I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but Dr. Gronemeyer, this goes right back to your initial question too. I agree with everything that's been said to this point, but how did we get to this point? And I think that a lot of it is the trade agreements such as NAFTA and others that sent all those manufacturing jobs overseas and left us in the situation that we're in today. I would add too that while college is not for everybody, those who would like to go to college I think should have the ability to go to college, and that's why I stand up for tuition-free public universities and colleges. It's simply a myth that we can't afford it. Had we gone the route that I desired and not invaded Iraq under false pretenses, the money that's been spent on that and the consequences of that would have funded not 5 years, not 10 years, 50 to 100 years of free college and university. I say we really need to raise the living wage, or excuse me, the minimum wage. It's just abysmal that it's been stuck at 7 1/4 federal.
So I think you were, there you are, I didn't see where you were. You're right to say that every politician talks about jobs. I mean, they're all talking about it, and it's been lip service. That's what we're seeing, and that's been the problem. And so what we need to do is identify the problems that we're facing when it comes to jobs, and then just move forward with the solutions on them. And so, one, as Dr. Gill mentioned, we have students who are going to college or to get the technical training they need, that it's costing them way too much. And by the time you get out of school, I mean, I'm almost 40, I'm still paying back my loans myself, and that's a very common thing, right? And I'll be paying them off for a very long time. And that's the same for a lot of people out there. That's the same for technical training. And so what's happening for our young people right now is just to get through the system, they're going into massive amounts of debt. And the problem is, the problem that relates to that is the fact that now that you've already invested all this money in your education, you are very reluctant to start a small business. And what we're seeing in our country is one of the greatest job creators in this country is related to small businesses that are coming through. And it's harder and harder for young people to do it. And when you look around, the rate of small businesses being sort of put forward are at their lowest levels. And another issue that people don't talk about a lot, but it's been a huge problem, especially for this area, is consolidation and the mergers that are happening. And in St. Louis especially, we've seen company after company that's a successful company, and the reason why they're targeted for this merger is because of the success, bought by some foreign company. And they export jobs. And we need to start saying, instead of just deciding what's best for the GDP of the country, we need to start making decisions as what's best for jobs and for people. And the last point I want to make is, we need to start investing in our infrastructure again. And we're not doing that enough, and that's what leads to jobs. And just an example, in the 13th district alone, there are 200,000 people who don't have access to broadband internet. And that's because of for-profit companies. It's going to cost them more than they're going to make off of it. We dealt with this issue once before when we needed to electrify America. You know what we did? We said everybody gets electricity. And we had the same plan for broadband internet, and that would lead to jobs. Seeing it in the classroom all the time where a student gets really specialized in one area where they find that niche and their eyes light up and they just want to stay in that one discipline. But it's important to get a whole student taught, get all the different avenues, knowing a Phillips from a flathead, spending time outside of the classroom. And so that goes to how you enrich the education. And not only how you enrich the education to prepare those students for the job, the college that they want to go to, the trade school that they want to go into, the vocational area that they want to go into, but also how do you prepare them for the job 15 years from now? Oftentimes I'm planning and preparing my students for jobs that haven't even been invented yet. And so we have to do the same thing with our students that we're then able to work and retool into the workplace, because I know my father's job has changed about 5 times in the past few years. And he's had to continue to get that professional learning, that professional development, so that he can remain relevant in the workplace, so that he can then actually benefit the systems that he's working on to make his job easier, more efficient, and it keeps him in the workplace. So I think it's both education in the high schools and middle schools, but also, once you're a professional, you continue to keep learning. And so education is that silver bullet that all politicians will talk about. But now it's time to actually think through what is going to be 15 years from now, 20 years from now, and what's going to make a long-lasting approach.
And yes, I agree with everything that's been stated as well. I also believe that we need, as a society, to quit, for lack of a better word, quit looking down on those kind of jobs, the well-being jobs. There's nothing wrong with building America. That sounds like a pretty good job to me. Yes, infrastructure, we need to focus on all of these things. We also need to focus on our youth, the middle school and high schools, as we were talking about. We need to let these kids know that, you know, you can support a family, you can do big things in these jobs. You just have to learn more about them and understand them. I think that for a lot of youth, they don't understand these jobs and what these jobs entail. And I think that it should be our job to really try to inform them about it so that they, you know what they're going to be doing or what they can be doing. I think that's a great way to move this forward.
I think, again, I agree with everything that's been said up here, but I think we also need to strengthen organized labor rather than attack organized labor. There's still a group of people that do a better job at training people for these types of skills than organized labor. And so that's why we've got to support organized labor. Our community colleges are also an amazing avenue for training and providing those types of skills all through Southern Illinois, particularly in the 12th Congressional District. We have some great, amazing community colleges. And I think one of the things that Adam said about people's attitude about this type of work, that is something, frankly, I think the Democratic Party, we have failed on. There's too many people in our we have looked down on people that do that type of work. And when you tell somebody that's 35 or 40 or 50 years old, your only avenue is to go to get a college degree, you're giving them no hope. That 4-year college degree is not the best avenue for everybody, okay? We have to provide other avenues for folks, and those are a couple of the ways that we can do that. In our infrastructure, there's plenty of work to be done, folks. Our roads are crumbling, our bridges are falling down. We have a lot of people that only have access to the things that we all sitting here have access to on our phones because they don't have an internet signal. That type of infrastructure, that has to be built. There's plenty of work to be done, folks, that will lift people up and give them a better wage and give them a better life. And I think one of the other things that was mentioned is that our public policy, our government supports big business and not small business. We have to stop writing rules and regulations and passing laws that support big business rather than small business, because small business is the way this country was built.
The question was asked, what are we going to do in the future? I'd like to take a second to talk about what I've done in the past and what I do every single day. The fact of the matter is, almost all new jobs since World War II were created by startups. And not small businesses per se, right? Startups, companies less than 5 years old. The education gap that exists, I couldn't agree more. I teach over at UMSL. The average age of my student is 25. They take 6 years to graduate. They're never been as smart as the students I used to teach at WashU, but they have different pathways to success. Universal, paid-for education, including community college, vocational apprenticeships, through four-year colleges, assuming that the student actually completes the degree, right? There can't be an ongoing bill being paid. You have to actually complete the degree. The return on investment to our economy, the return on investment to our country, it's exponential. There's no question that the money is there and the impact is there. And frankly, I spend every single day working with students trying to help them create their own jobs, help to create their own businesses, and hiring people. So I'm confident that I have the expertise and I know the policies that need to be implemented. We need to move away from small business development and focus on startups. It's not to say that we don't protect every job that currently exists, but we need to focus on the future. We need to invest in entrepreneurship. We need to change the economic development paradigm in this country.
All right, next question.
All right. First of all, my name is Cindy McMullen. I'm from District 12, and I want to thank you all for being here today and responding to all of our questions, specifically mine. So I'm, like I said, a constituent of Representative Bost, and as you can see, I'm also an active volunteer with a gun violence prevention group called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. With 90 Americans being killed and hundreds other being injured by gun violence every day in this country, this is affecting more and more Americans, and why I am involved in this group. As a lifelong Southern Illinois resident, grew up here, and a active volunteer in Moms, I respect the Second Amendment, and I advocate for responsible and safe gun ownership. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. My father-in-law was a gun owner for practically his whole life. My husband grew up, I think he got his first gun when he was 8, hunting with his dad and uncle and cousins throughout Southern Illinois. What I do have an issue with is when dangerous or untrained individuals carry in our communities. That is why I support things like legislation to require background checks on all gun sales. We know they work. Since its inception, our current system has blocked over 3 million prohibited buyers from, or individuals from purchasing guns. I'd like to see that expanded. I'm supportive of that. Unfortunately, Representative Bost is not. I oppose dangerous and irresponsible legislation like what is pending currently in DC, and that is concealed carry reciprocity, specifically HR 38. This bill is heavily being pushed by the gun lobby, and I feel that if it becomes law, it's going to trample on our state's rights to determine our own requirements for concealed carry in the state. If it becomes law, Illinois would be forced to accept the standards of every other state in this country, including states that have weaker requirements than our own. For instance, you have Missouri, right across the river, that has permitless carry. So Missourian as young as 19 can carry without a permit, without training, perhaps without a background check. If this law becomes, or this bill becomes law, Illinois would be forced to allow them to carry in our communities. I'm greatly concerned about that. I fear about the safety of my family and my friends and my community. Both Representatives Bost and Davis have signed on as co-sponsors to this bill, so they think it's a good idea. Okay, we're going to have a discussion with Representative Bost on Monday. We'll see how that goes. So my question to you is, if you are my elected representative, okay, what would you do to promote public safety and ensure that guns stay out of the hands of dangerous and untrained individuals.
Would you like to answer first?
I definitely would propose legislation to enhance the requirements, the background checks. That's an absolute must. I don't know where else you can start. It keeps the guns away from people who just don't need them, and it's just a must. And it's pretty simple. Just do the background checks, keep the guns out of the hands of the people who should not have them. At least that's simple.
Thank you for the question, and we had a conversation about this earlier to this, and I think it's a very important topic, and it affects a lot of us. And obviously, we're all going to be on board with tougher background checks and legislation. But I think more important to that is also to look at, and we discussed this as well, innovative measures that can protect us from guns getting in the wrong hands. And if you know anything about gun violence in St. Louis, most of that gun violence actually comes from guns that are obtained through break-ins of vehicles and homes. That's how these guns get on the street. And there are some really innovative young people working in St. Louis that are developing products that would properly lock these guns inside of cars, and they need our help to push for legislation and maybe on the state level to get these types of lock boxes in vehicles around America, or at least on the state level, so that we can stop the flood of these stolen guns onto the street, which leads to murders and deaths. So this is one of those types of issues that I would promote as your representative, is to think about innovative measures to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, because those are the people that are killing people.
All right, we have time for 3 more answers. All right.
Well, I can't serve as your representative unless you relocate, but I'm on board with you 100%. And working in the emergency department full-time for the last couple of decades, I see a lot of victims of gun violence, and it touches me deeply. I also see perpetrators. We often have patients come in, the mentally ill, that are brought in because of a situation in which they were holding people at bay while with a weapon, and it boggles my mind. These are not people who suddenly went from mentally healthy to mentally ill. They're people with a long-standing history of being ill, who we all would have been well served with the type of legislation that you're talking about.
So, first, like you, my father-in-law is a hunter, and my brother-in-law is a hunter, so I do support the rights of responsible gun owners. And I think, I'm from Southern Illinois originally myself, so I can understand that. At the same time, I think there's a lot we can be doing. So, on the issue of reciprocity, isn't it interesting when where they're at on states' rights, when it affects them the other way? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And, I'll say, one issue I'm seeing out there is there's legislation right now to try to keep guns out of the hands of terrorists. And who's stopping that? It's the gun lobby. And this is the same issue that we're dealing with on a lot of issues. On healthcare issues, health insurance law, right? Climate change issue. We have oil companies out there that have heard it for years, put out misinformation. And so issue after issue after issue on where we want things to go, what's stopping us are the corporate interests and the special interests that are keeping us from doing it. And we just have to start getting people in Washington who are willing to fight and understand. And what we're going to need is everyone in this room to be working on it, because that's the only way we're going to accomplish it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way you frame that question. Right? I think that nowhere in this country is the divide between rural and urban and the disconnect between what really is part of our culture, right? There's no question that there's very reasonable approaches that are being fought against, right? That is common sense to everyone. Bottom line for me is that the issue of gun violence, and we really have to triage this, right? I want to save those kids that are getting murdered every single day. right? And not unlike the opioid epidemic, and epidemic is the right word, this is not a failure of law enforcement, right? These are public health, mental health issues, and there's modalities, there's ways in which we can approach the issue of gun violence, specifically in dense urban areas, right? That won't infringe on the Second Amendment, right? But that would still allow us to make meaningful inroads into attacking these plagues of our modern day America. So thank you for the way in which you frame that, right? Because it's an issue that I have difficulty speaking on because I feel so strongly about the Second Amendment, a strict interpretation of the Second Amendment, but nonetheless, something's got to change.
All right, so everybody that was in line before we needed to start moving on to the next segment for today, I apologize for running over, but so you have questions, correct, that were submitted?
Yeah, if you were in line, please just give us your questions and we'll get it to the candidates and try to address them on the website or
We'll get the questions to the candidates, yes? Yes. Okay, that sounds fantastic. Our featured speaker is here today. We have gubernatorial Democratic candidate, Senator Daniel Biss. Thank you, candidates. You can join the audience.
All right, good afternoon. Let's try that one more time. Good afternoon. Love it. Thank you very much. I'm Daniel Biss. I'm State Senator in the 9th District. I'm running for Governor of Illinois. I'd like to we do need to do it, Jessica. Can we just take a minute to talk about how great it was that there were this many congressional candidates on the stage? I mean, this is really significant. There really is something happening out there. I'm going to be very quick because if you don't mind, I'd love to have as much of this conversation as possible be Q&A and discussion and your advice, and you can yell at me about stuff too, whatever you prefer. But I just wanted to quickly have a chance to introduce myself and to say what brought me into this race, what brought me into this, let's be honest, challenging race in this pivotal moment for the state of Illinois. Spoiler alert, the answer is in this room. The answer is the unbelievable amount of activity that exists right now in this moment, the hunger that people feel, and what that, I think, can mean for the future of the state of Illinois, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next generation. So quickly, just a bit about me. None of this is the plan, not one bit of it. I used to teach math. I taught math at the University of Chicago. That was my dream job. I live in a suburban community called Evanston with my wife Karen and our 2 children, Elliot and Theodore, who are going to be starting 2nd and 4th grade in our neighborhood public school in 2 days. Sometimes I think they're excited about this, other times they're not totally sure.
And I was just happy to be teaching math. And what I saw was a president lying to our country. What I saw was our country spinning out of control. What I saw was reckless decisions, ignoring the will of the majority of the public, and reckless decisions putting our national integrity in danger, reckless decisions imperiling the world. And I just felt like I had to stand up and do something. And so I showed up. I started to grab clipboards and knock on doors and fell in love with this idea that we could build movements of people to change society. So that president's name was George W. Bush. And that time was very quaint by comparison to the time we live in. I eventually ran for the legislature, lost the first time, became an unemployed idiot who had a grad student wife and a 4.5-month-old child. It's not a recommended lifestyle choice if you're curious. If anyone wants me to advise their adult children not to do that, I'm unavailable. But I had the incredible good fortune to have another chance and have been in the state legislature since the beginning of 2011. And it's been an honor, and it's been a joy, and it's been weird, and it's been frustrating, and it's been exciting, and we've been able to work on issues that I think really made a difference in people's lives, and I was able to see what happens if you get up every single day and work and work and work and work. And then Bruce Rauner became governor. And Bruce Rauner took a blowtorch to the state of Illinois. And the impact on our schools is extraordinary. The impact on our community colleges and universities is unimaginable. The impact on our social service providers is sickening. The impact on our state's fiscal condition is stunning. $11 million of debt every single day. The state was on the precipice of entering junk bond status after 2 years and 6 days without a budget. And now we have a budget. And some people feel like that means it's time to have a parade and a celebration, and play on the victory party, and give lengthy, complicated speeches about how great we all are. And the budget that we have is a budget that stops the 2 years and 6 days of bleeding, but doesn't reverse it. And it doesn't reverse decades of a system that was broken before that. And here's what I think is so crucial about this moment, and here honestly is why I'm in this race. Yes, Bruce Rauner, like I said, took a blowtorch to the state of Illinois. We've got to defeat him no matter what. But that's not all we have to do, because the truth is that when he became governor, it's not like things were perfect. We already had more debt than anybody else, a worse credit rating, more consecutively incarcerated governors. It's very depressing. We already had the 4th or 5th most regressive tax code of any state in the union, punishing the middle class, punishing the working poor, because we don't have the guts to ask the rich to pay their share because of who pays for the campaigns. The most unjust school funding system of any state in the union. I feel like I should wield this gavel. I'm so upset about this, but I'm going to put it down. It seems really better for all of us. Oh, and by the way, Democrats were in control for 12 years, and our minimum wage was still only $8.25 an hour. So we have this nightmare we're going through right now, and it got to us on the heels of, and in my opinion, because of decades of a system that really wasn't about the rest of us either. And the question is, what do you do about all of that at once? And in my opinion, you can only address that if you have a movement of people strong enough and brave enough and bold enough to demand a completely different standard of government from our state. Because democracy is an extraordinarily effective mechanism for realizing expectations. And for decades, we've had really low expectations of Illinois government. They've been met every single day of the week. And I think this is a moment that we can demand more. And I think that we can look ourselves in the eye and say, this idea that we have to continue having among the most unfair tax codes in the country and the worst system of school funding, because that's how it's always been, because the people who pay for the campaigns like it that way, because the transition is too complicated, we just don't need to accept that anymore. But we're not going to change that by saying, all we have to do is get more votes than Bruce Rauner and call it a day, everything's fine again. We have to change that by completely transforming our vision of the state. I want to close by telling you about how my day went, professionally speaking, yesterday. Because yesterday was Friday, and Rauner only does things he's embarrassed of, so he only takes action on Friday afternoon, because he hopes no one's going to notice in the weekend, but y'all are here, so let me tell you. He vetoed a bunch of my bills. He vetoed a bill that I passed to put on his desk to make Illinois have the toughest equal pay for women law in the country. He would have had the best completely absurd gender pay gap that still exists. Yesterday, August 25th, he vetoed that bill. Today, August 26th, is Women's Equality Day. He's laughing at us. He's laughing at us. That's not all. Then he vetoed a bill that I passed to crack down on wage theft. So here we are in a union hall, and let's just remember that there are thousands of workers every year who don't earn the money that they are owed because their employer just takes it out of their pocket. Because their employer doesn't choose to keep track of overtime properly, because all of a sudden if you forget when the overtime happened, then you maybe think you can get away with paying somebody less. Because there's complicated software that exists to make it easy for employers to pay less and hard for employees to fight back. And so I passed strong, tough wage theft legislation that Governor Rauner vetoed yesterday. But I also had an experience in LaSalle on, I'm super bad at the calendar, but I think it was Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday. It was a day, it was in the morning, and it was in LaSalle. And I was talking with a woman who said to me that she's really concerned about her son, who's 30, and he's in college right now at SIU. And I just thought that was a nice thing to say, and I was going to wait for her to go on to the next thing, but she felt like she had to apologize for why her 30-year-old son was in college. Not my point of view on this matter, but that was her attitude. And she said, you know, he couldn't afford school when he got out of high school, so we were going to help him by taking out a mortgage against our house. But then the housing crisis happened, and our home value plummeted, so we couldn't do it. I thought, well, that's 6 or 7 different kinds of horrifying all on top of each other. And congratulations to your son for having had the fortitude and the persistence to find work without any post-secondary certification, which is harder and harder and harder, and keep himself going and now find a way that the economy has recovered somewhat to be able to afford the end of his time at SIU. And she said, yeah, thanks, but here's the problem. Now he's over 26 and he's got a pre-existing condition. And what am I supposed to do, or what's he supposed to do if these Republicans in Congress finish their job of gutting the Affordable Care Act? And I don't answer that question because, as you can imagine, I get that question a lot, and I talked about it for a while. But then last night, while the governor was busy vetoing my equal pay for my gender pay equity bill and my crackdown on wage theft bill, while he was busy vetoing our $15 an hour minimum wage bill because he thinks that $8.25 is more than enough, too much if anything, he signed another bill that I passed. He signed a bill that I passed that says that it doesn't matter what they do in Washington. In Illinois, we're not going to allow insurance companies to discriminate based upon pre-existing conditions. And as even though he probably didn't want to do it, even though he probably only did it because he thought, well, gosh, if I'm running against Daniel in the general election, it'll be kind of embarrassing if he can talk all over the state of Illinois about how I personally am the reason that Illinois residents don't have that protection. But it doesn't matter. It's the law of the land. And I just want us to dwell on this for a moment, that in this dark and difficult time, in this moment where Donald Trump is our president, There's still like a couple of hairs in the back of my neck that stand up, and that sounds comes out of my mouth. Even though Bruce Rauner is the governor, even though the attacks are so many, understand that the opportunity is there for us to win battles. Understand that we can move forward and make progress. Understand that if we didn't have a giant resistance movement across Illinois that Bruce Rauner is scared to death of, the political progress isn't just about putting one foot in front of the other, taking one step after the next, and fighting and getting off the mat and fighting again, and understand that we are building something right now. And I don't mean Daniel Biss, the candidate for governor, though we can talk about that later if you're interested. I mean we, the resistance movement, are building something unique and special and extraordinary, the likes of which this nation, I believe, has not seen for a very, 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 very long time. And if we use that power that we are building to make the kinds of changes that we have only dreamed about in Illinois for decades, but known for certain were necessary to have an economically just and fair society, we're going to come out of this better off than we were before. It sounds crazy, it's surprising, but I'm telling you it's true. Thank you for what you're doing as a part of this resistance movement. Thank you for the fights that you have. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your persistence, because it's not January 21st anymore, but you're still here. And know that together we can do extraordinary things. Thank you very much. Take questions about everything.
Hi, Senator Biss. My name is Marcia Campbell, and I am president of the Southwestern Illinois Democratic Women. And we have members of the 12th and the 13th, so there's quite a few of our members in the audience today. But I wanted to first take care of the elephant in the room when it comes to Illinois' debt, and that's the pension. And, you know, there's probably quite a few people in this room that get pensions from being a teacher or a state worker or something. We all paid out of every paycheck that we got. The failure in the pension system was the state of Illinois. And I'm sure you're familiar with that history. And there was years when the state just said, we can balance the budget, we just won't make our pension payment this year. So the Supreme Court of Illinois has spoken and has said, no, you can't strip the benefits from these pensioners. So can we move on now? Can we find a way to restructure that debt or some way to deal with it so we can start fixing the real problems here and not have every legislative session be all about who's going to propose a pension reform that's going to go to the Supreme Court and be found unconstitutional?
Yeah, that's, I think you asked that question in just the right way. And so I'll just repeat a little bit of it back to you. We have more pension debt than any other state in the union by most measures. There's no question that's true. It's not because our pensions are more generous. It's not because we have more workers. It's because we're the #1 state by far at the dubious skill of skipping pension payments. We're the #1 state when it comes to saying, yeah, we can balance our budget even in this bad year with revenue down because we're just not going to put what we ought to put in the pension system. We're the #1 state at saying we want to expand programmatic spending, but we don't have the guts to bring in the revenue, so we're just going to take it from what should have been put in the pension system. And by the way, in the mid-90s, we were a state that enacted a 50-year pension funding ramp. Bless you. That makes me sneeze too. We enacted a 50-year pension funding ramp that no actuary in the world would have signed off on. But every politician who knew that they wouldn't have to pay the bill because they'd be retired before the bill came due was very happy to vote for it. And those of us who are in office now say, gosh, thanks. Though maybe there's some people who are in office then and now, I don't know. So #1, there's a way to make sure that pension systems work well. That's if the payment gets made every year. Not when it's convenient, not when the economy's growing, not when you can't think of something else in the last minute you want to spend the money on, but always. And there's a pension system in Illinois that has that quality. That's the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. And that money doesn't get put in every year because the employers are nice people or because they're just enlightened thinkers about actuarial science. They get put every year because they have to. Because if they don't, they get penalized, and the penalty is big enough they don't even bother trying. By the way, in Texas, the teachers' pension system has a constitutional protection. Not our constitutional protection that protects the benefit, but a protection that says the payment's got to get put in every year. And sure enough, they're in good shape. So number one, we have to put in place a system that makes sure that every year the proper actuarially responsible payment gets made. I will tell you right now that as governor, I'm not going to sign a budget that doesn't make an actuarially responsible payment into the pension systems, but you should say that's not good enough because I'm not going to be governor forever. And we have to put a system in place that makes sure those payments will get made. That's number one. Number two, unfortunately you're right, that even though the Supreme Court has spoken extraordinarily clearly, and for those of you, I assume you've all read the Supreme Court decision. No, but anyway, it's not a technicality. They're not arguing about semicolons. They're not saying, oh, it was almost constitutional, but not quite. It's a unanimous Supreme Court decision making crystal clear that the state cannot change pension benefits unilaterally. The state cannot make changes that are not agreed to in a negotiation with the individual worker. I think we ought to take that seriously. And yet, as I said, you're absolutely correct, that notwithstanding that, there have been a series of efforts since then, including by people I have a lot of respect for, people who I know are sincere and trying hard to solve a problem, to make unilateral changes, to make changes that I believe would be unconstitutional. And there's been a lot of pressure on me to support those changes because of the people pushing them and because of the kind of culture in the Senate. And I've just said no, and I voted no again and again. I think if we don't take the Supreme Court seriously, we're not, first of all, in my opinion, doing our job properly, but we're also not, we're not setting ourselves up for success. We're just setting ourselves up for another couple-year-long exercise of spinning wheels. So let's make sure that we take that utterly serious in the future, and that's something you can always count on me for. Next, what can we do to decrease the cost, if anything? Well, I would say we should look at the features of the Illinois pension system that are different than most states, and we might want to guess that if something is really different in Illinois about pensions, it might not be because it's better. So, for example, and this is a little, things are going to get a little bit boring around here, but I don't know what to tell you. You invited a mathematician to give a talk about pensions. Illinois has 628 different pension systems. Now we're not number one, Pennsylvania is, they've got 1,900, but we're number two. Florida's number three, they're a little bit behind us, and nobody else is anywhere close. Why? Because Collinsville has two, one for firefighters, one for police officers. So does Alton. So does my hometown. So does almost every community in Illinois. And I got interested in these pension systems, so I started calling around the municipalities in my legislative district, and I asked them about, hey, when's your next meeting of your fire and police pension board? And when I called, the response was, well, why do you want to know? Which seemed like a strange question to ask about a public, open meeting, but we got through it, and I figured out the calendar of these meetings, and I started showing up. And so I went, I think one morning, I think it was to the Wilmette Police Pension Board, and you sit there and there's the volunteer trustees doing their best, and then there's the investment consultant presenting, talking about all the fees they're taking for investing the money, and then there's the accounting consultant, and then the legal consultant, all doing the same presentations. And then in the afternoon, I went to, I think it was the Northfield Fire Pension Board meeting, and I got there and realized we all should have carpooled. It's all the same vendors. It's all the same companies. It's a few politically connected companies that have figured out how to pull money out of all of these different pension funds into their own pocket, not benefiting the worker, not benefiting the taxpayer, not benefiting anything. If we were to do what Ohio did and merge all of these, Ohio did that by the way in 1965, you wouldn't touch a single worker's benefit, but you would be running it in a modern, efficient way, the cost would be less, the investment returns would be better. I get it, we're already all asleep, all of us. But listen, the solutions to this stuff that are going to work are going to be technical, they're going to be negotiated, they're going to be agreed upon, and they're going to be achieved by looking under the hood and figuring out in the guts of the system how do we make it work right, not how do we go after the workers who, as you said, put every dime they were asked in. In fact, whether or not they wanted to, it just got taken out of their paycheck. Imagine if it just got taken out of the state's paycheck. That would solve a lot of problems. Finally, we have to make the payments. The payments are expensive because of the errors of generations past. We'd like to make the expensive payments affordable. How about if we had a fair tax system in Illinois? How about if we stop being one of only 4 states in the union with a constitutional provision saying you have to have a flat tax, which means that if we want to ask Bruce Rauner and his $188 million salary to pay a higher tax rate than a teacher who's making $45,000 a year, that's illegal. We can't do that. We're one of only 4 states like that. And so we need to fix our tax code. We need to finally say, in this country and in this state, for the last couple generations, almost all the new money's gone to the very top, and yet we can't touch it without going after the middle class. That's wrong, it's unfair, it's economically inefficient, and it's bankrupted our state. If we actually want to get out of this pension debt problem in a way that does not really harm the rest of what we do in state government, we've got to fix our tax code. And so though that was the end of my answer, that's the beginning of my priorities. That's where we start our work when I'm elected governor, because from that success flows a lot more opportunity that would be transformative for the state of Illinois. The next answer will be shorter, I totally promise.
So this is kind of a follow-up to that, actually. I work at SIUE, and I actually am in the pension system, the service system. And one of the things I hear constantly is, oh, well, it's changed, the narrative's changed from, I don't have a pension, so why do you deserve one? And then we get treated as, oh, well, you're getting something extra and something special.
That's right.
Not something that I, as a person, when I started working there, this is an agreed upon benefit, the same as somebody gets, 12 days off a year, or somebody gets a bonus at the end of the year. And it makes it really difficult, and I think it's going to be difficult for you as a candidate to stand up there and say that the pensions are okay when a majority of people that do not have pensions look at us and say, we're getting something extra.
That's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you asked. And I would have actually answered that question if I hadn't already gone on for so painfully long for Marcia. But I get that all the time. And I get actually something a little bit worse and a little bit dumber, which is, Daniel, you know that the private sector went to 401ks 40 years ago. So the public sector has to also. Come on, why are you taking so long? Nobody has pensions in the private sector anymore, Daniel, so obviously you're going to have to follow along in the public sector, as though it's a law of nature. Now listen, it's true. The 401k experiment in the private sector is not brand new anymore. It's been around for really now a couple generations. And that means we get to ask how it's gone. How has it gone? Very poorly. Very poorly. We have a preposterous level of inadequate retirement savings in this country. You know the gap between what people have put away in their 401ks and what they should have put away in order to be able to maintain a lifestyle after retirement at 67 is? You know what that gap is? Depending on how you measure, it's between 6 and 14, wait for it, trillion dollars because of the failure of the 401k system. And yet, there's this narrative out there that says we've just got to win that race to the bottom and push everyone who has not already been unfairly harmed by the unwise transition to follow suit. Now here's what I'll say though. The system where a public sector worker has a certain type of retirement benefit and private sector workers have a much more stingy benefit is not a sustainable world. There's going to have to be some leveling. The problem is we shouldn't be leveling down. We should say, this was a mistake. So we're going to have to lift people up who have had their retirements taken away from them in the private sector. So this has been the most meaningful work of my career. There was an idea kicking around already in 2005 or 6 to create a retirement savings program for workers who have no plan at work at all. Not only no pension, but no 401k, no 403b, nothing at all. The idea was you could automatically enroll workers in the situation into a retirement plan, give them a shot at a dignified retirement, and by the way, use the power of government's purchasing to push down the fees so they weren't being hosed by Wall Street. And this was an idea that
back in the 2008 presidential campaign, both Barack Obama and John McCain supported. It isn't, when I talk about leveling up, it just levels up a little bit. It's not enough, frankly, but it's a really important start, and it begins to change that story and talk about how we can create retirement security for everybody else. But when Barack Obama got elected, the Republicans decided this was some kind of communist idea. And so they fought it in Washington and had no prayer. And so state legislators across the country decided they were going to start to fight this fight in their states. And in every single state, the life insurance industry and the Wall Street lobby killed the bill. Everyone. I decided I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And I introduced the bill, and I worked it, and I worked it, and I amended it a ton of times. And I drove all around the state, meeting with legislators in their district offices, and meeting with advocates in church basements, and trying to organize support. And after 2 years of nonstop work, we passed the bill. It was one of the last bills that Governor Quinn signed into law in early January of 2015. And then, after we broke that logjam, Oregon, California, Vermont, Connecticut, Maryland have all followed. And so we're building now a national movement that says, wait a second, we're going to solve our retirement crisis by lifting people up, not by tearing people down. And I agree, you can't just expect people in the private sector to be punished the way they are and not mind that someone else has more. We all need to fight together to lift people up. And if we can have that conversation in a serious way, I think you're going to see the so-called pension envy go away, and you're going to improve people's lives in a very, very meaningful way.
The absence of a national climate policy, coupled with last week's disbanding by the Trump administration of a federal advisory panel that is focused on science-driven ways to fight climate change, is resulting in cities and states stepping up to fill this huge, ginormous federal leadership void, vacuum. If elected, in what ways would you accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy for the communities you serve, and that includes me, my children, and my children's children?
That's right. Thank you for that question. And you're allowed to say please clap if you're asking people to clap for someone else. So thank you for applauding that question. It's really, really important. And after I answer it at some point, I think it might be worth doing a little bit of a rundown of the other ways in which state government should be a leader in the resistance, because we've got such an opportunity in a blue state of this size, and Governor Rauner is ruining it all for us. But let's start on climate. So when President Trump, someday it's not going to catch in my throat that way, and that's going to really be bad news. When he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, I was instantly the first gubernatorial candidate to say that I would, of course, be one of the many governors, joining a whole bunch of mayors and other local officials who said that regardless of what Trump wants to do, we are going to participate in continuing to meet those standards. Now, those governors are not all Democrats, and yet, even so, Bruce Rauner doesn't have the guts to do it. Even so, Bruce Rauner doesn't have the guts to join those governors. So let's start there. That's the beginning. Let us not, though, and thank you for pointing this out, pretend for a second that that's the end. The end is a 100% clean energy economy. That's what the end is. And Illinois needs to clearly state that as the long-term goal, lay out a timeline to get there, and begin to make investments to do it. Now, we passed a law in December that actually was a good law when it comes to investment in solar and wind and renewables and efficiency. So that was an important step. It doesn't get us all the way there. So we have to accelerate that investment. We have to be as creative as possible. I've been fighting, for instance, for something called PACE financing, which is a program that enables homeowners or business owners to install, for instance, a solar panel on their roof and finance it over time, because of course it decreases their energy bill over time, but finance it over time on their property tax bill, because of course if you sell your house, then both your property tax bill and the solar panels stay where they are, so they stay together, right? That is something that is working successfully in other states, and that was another complicated, difficult battle that we were able to finally be successful this past year. There are a lot of different tools that we need to be deploying to make sure that every individual, every community, and the whole state are simultaneously moving us toward this clean energy transition.
Lastly, I want to say that we need to think about what that transition means. And there is an ugly history in this country of saying, we're going to make this transition, and it's going to be better overall for most people, and some people might be hurt in the short term, but hey, don't worry about it, it'll all turn out fine. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And so what we need to do is have a specific transition plan. We need to understand that if we are genuine leaders on this issue, then a state like Illinois with a combination of a traditionally strong industrial base with a remarkable research capacity, with phenomenal solar and wind resources here, has the ability to really be a national leader, which becomes an economic engine. But you don't just sort of close down coal plants and then hope for the best. You put in place the plan, and you put in place the specific job opportunities for the specific people whose jobs are at risk, right? So you don't say, good luck, but you also don't say, here's some money, go to college. You say, here's your job, and here's the 6-week training program it's going to take to prepare you for that job, and we're paying for the training program. And that kind of activity does two things. One is justice, it's economic fairness. It doesn't punish people for being kind of collateral damage of this transformation. But number two, it creates the political support where people won't be fighting and people will be excited about it. I want to end by saying that there is an incredible economic and racial justice lens that we can't forget about when we talk about what the current energy mix does. I was very recently in Waukegan, Illinois. Waukegan is one of the comparatively few majority minority and relatively poor cities on Lake Michigan. The rest of them are not very. The rest of them are pretty white and rich, let's put it that way. And you might not be shocked to learn that that's where there's a coal plant. That's where there's a coal plant that spews 8 billion gallons into Lake Michigan every single day. That's where there's a coal plant that results in children suffering from asthma at extraordinary rates. That's where there's a coal plant that means that it's totally unclear what the long-term neurological even impacts on the young people who breathe right next to it and play right next to it are. So when we think about this transition, we got to think about the environmental and energy consequences and economic consequences of getting it right. We got to think about the job risks of getting it wrong and therefore our moral responsibility to create that transition. And we have to understand the economic and racial injustice that exists right now and make sure that our plan includes the kind of remediation necessary so that we don't leave a toxic site behind in predominantly poor communities of color. Yep, in the back. Near the back, how about that? You.
My name is Harlan Morgan. I was a student trustee at our local community college for the last academic year. And I had the unfortunate distinction of being the first student trustee in the history of our college to vote for layoffs. We laid off several hundred employees. Luckily, we're one of the few in Southern Illinois that hasn't had to lay off faculty. What would you do to fund higher education properly in the state of Illinois as governor?
Let's talk short term and let's talk long term. And thank you for your service. And I'm sorry that the state put you in a position where apparently you had to do that. You know this, but maybe not everybody does. When the community college system was created, the bargain got made. We're going to fund community colleges a third, a third, a third. 1/3 tuition, 1/3 property tax levy, and 1/3 state resources. I was just told that in the last year it wasn't a third, a third, a third. It was 47%, 46%, 7%. 7%. So when the state fails its responsibility to fund community colleges properly, what does that mean? Higher tuition, higher property taxes. Congratulations, everybody. So we just can't have that. We have to start, and you know this, we have to start by having a budget. Every year, not just the years that we got around to it. And the budget has to fund higher education properly. Now, what does properly mean? You start by going back to where we used to be before this Brown area nightmare happened. But I think you got to ask yourself whether that's good enough. And the answer is it's not good enough. The answer is we're not investing in ourselves. We're not investing in our own people. A society that gives up on investing in its own young people is a society that doesn't believe in its future. And if you ask me how to interpret our own behavior, that's how we've been acting, as though we don't believe in ourselves. So what we need is real, honest, robust investment in higher education. I hate to sound like a broken record, but we can't do that without fixing our tax code. We can't do that with this country's fourth or fifth most regressive tax system. We can't do that with the tax system that says, hey, the middle class haven't gotten a raise for a couple generations, but the only way to get more money is to tax them more. By the way, when it comes to community college in particular, by the standards of the state budget, the numbers we're talking about are pretty small. I think it's unconscionable that we're even arguing about tuition. Wait, I've got opinions about four-year college tuition we can talk about later, if you're interested. The notion that we're even hesitating before making community college free is insanity. It's insanity. It's so affordable. It's so realistic. An actual bottom rung on the ladder of opportunity. And so that's something that we could do, honestly, if we really were committed to it, we could do it tomorrow. And once we have a truly fair tax system, we can do it without even hesitating. And anybody who says that going back to the funding that we had in 2014 is good enough, you gotta do better. And the tuition that we collect is a fairly modest amount of money by the standards of the state's budget, and a fairly modest amount of money by the standards of community colleges' finances even. But it's the difference between someone being able to attend and not in many cases. It's just a bad idea. Okay.
How are you going to stand up against the lovely Illinois Policy Institute and other, I signed up one time to get something from them.
Seems like a very big mistake.
So we definitely in order to defeat them. But all the things they always have on their bus, the corporations that are desperately trying to leave our state, they're always, Caterpillar. I mean, I don't think it's true, but we need to stop that image from going out to the people in the state.
Well, it doesn't hurt their cause that they have a governor.
Right.
I mean, the Illinois Policy Institute has shut its doors because it's basically turned all its people over to run the governor's office. I think they all got fired this week, so maybe they'll go back over, which I don't even know what to root for anymore. It's confusing. So a couple things. Number one, they've got a message. We're going to fix Illinois by getting rid of all taxes and regulations and unions. It's a dumb message. It's a wrong message. It's a we're going to make things worse and not better message. But it's a message. In my opinion, Illinois Democrats have been extremely good at saying no to Bruce Rauner, which is very important, because Bruce Rauner is terrible. In my opinion, Illinois Democrats have been not so good at saying yes to anything else. And I think that a lot rides on that distinction. I think this election rides on that distinction for sure. I think if we run for governor on a platform of Rauner is terrible, end of story, I think we're in a lot of trouble. Because the people of Illinois see that the state of Illinois has problems. And if the message they're hearing is only Rauner stinks, and by the way, I have no solutions, which must mean I think everything is fine, I think we're doomed to a long night in November of 2018. If instead we talk about what changes we need to make to the tax system, so the tax system is fair and stops finally punching the middle class, how that enables us to fund schools properly for real, not moving, by the way, from being worst in the country when it comes to school funding fairness to being still worst in the country but a little bit better, but actually funding schools fairly. What it means if we raise wages and standards of living so the middle class will begin to thrive. What it means if we transform our election system so the big money doesn't control our politics anymore. If we lay out that aspirational progressive vision for how we improve lives and then run on it, we're going to win, and then talk about it, we'll have a lot to push back against the Policy Institute with. So I think that's a really important piece of it. You'll be next, but I've got one more piece of the answer. Let me say this about the Policy Institute and the governor and a lot of the editorial board's theory that everyone's leaving Illinois because the taxes are so high and the regulations are so extreme. Number one, a lot of people are leaving Illinois. Some businesses are leaving Illinois. A lot of businesses aren't coming to Illinois. Why? Well, maybe there are some that in fact are here because they wish they could pay workers less, they hate having unions, they wish they could pay less in taxes, and they wish they didn't have to be regulated. There are companies like that. I don't think they're our first choice when we're trying to figure out how to grow a middle-class economy. There's a race to the bottom that's on, and we could try to win that race, which is Bruce Rauner's idea. What's the prize when you win the race? More minimum wage jobs, more people living in poverty. But they are leaving for other reasons too, and we know this because there are states that have fair tax systems and strong regulatory systems to protect the air and the water and workers' rights. And those states are doing well. Minnesota is the example we hear about all the time. Oregon is another example that comes to mind. There are states that thrive with exactly the kind of environment that Rauner and his Policy Institute claim is a stranglehold around the neck of a free market. So what's different about us? A couple things. Number one, we're a preposterous basket case. And so I talk to businesses all the time who are like, I kind of like Illinois, I would love to come, but I don't want to even analyze what the situation is now because it's going to be worse anyways. Right? I can figure out what the taxes mean for me now, but I know they're going to be double in 10 years, so why bother? I know what the workforce is now, but you guys haven't funded education properly, so it's about to get worse, so why conduct that analysis? I know what the infrastructure looks like now, but it's crumbling and you're not paying for more, so I don't know what it's going to look like. We need stability. We need a sustainable budget. We don't need to solve the budget like an arithmetic problem on a spreadsheet in 1 year. We need to build a sustainable budget that works for the long term. And that means having a tax system that matches our modern economy. If our budget is only going to get balanced by punishing the middle class more and more, no one's going to look at this as a stable situation. Last of all, here's a really, really important thing that we should have with our taxes and our regulations. A level playing field. You know how taxes work in Illinois? If your corporation is big enough that you can hire a lobbyist to go to Springfield and threaten to leave, you get a special break. You know who pays up the difference? Everybody else. And so if you're a new business, if you're a small business, if you're a business trying to grow, you can't figure out which lobbyist to hire, you don't have the money to pay them, you're paying more because of the corporate welfare that exists to protect only the very large. And our regulatory system and our professional licensing systems are just exactly the same. And so I'm not somebody who pretends that the lowest taxes of all are the best, that we need no regulation. On the contrary. I think regulation is crucial. And we need a tax system that funds our government. But set it up on a level playing field. Because if you make it so difficult to be a small, growing business, you cut off the place that new jobs come from at the knees. And that's where we are at Illinois. So we're going to fight back against those guys and their message by having our own powerful message about how we're going to lift people up. We're also going to fight back on the issues by understanding what it really takes to reverse the flow of people out of Illinois and enacting those kinds of level playing field policies, because that's what it actually takes to fix this place. I'm not going to enter into that dispute. You can listen if you want.
Okay, so it's funny you talk about that. I have a friend in Chicago actually who he's vice president of a small software company, and his boss moved most all of the company to Florida a few years back. And as I recall, the complaint was exactly what you were talking about. They were tired of paying all the taxes when the big companies didn't pay them. So kudos on that.
Thank you. That was a great question.
My question actually, if you've harped a few times on the flat tax rate,
Yep.
it's embedded in the Illinois Constitution.
Yep.
It's been a long time since my Illinois civics class. You have a room full of activists here.
Yep.
What can we do, and what is the process for getting the Constitution of this state changed, and what can the people in this room do to help?
That was a good question.
So let's just kind of dwell here for a second, because it's really crucial. The Illinois Constitution says you gotta have a flat tax. There's only 4 states that say that. It means our taxes are unfair, and it means our governments don't have adequate revenue. And all the things we're talking about rely on us fixing this first if we're gonna do that. And everyone's nodding, and we're all agreeing, and we're sort of thinking, so why are we even talking about this anymore? How long has this been? So walk back with me to the past for a minute. Illinois created its income tax in the late 60s, and that was actually a low watermark for economic inequality in America. So people were more equal then than any other time in the 20th century, or certainly since. And so the idea was, hey, it's kind of fair-ish to ask someone making, $2 million to pay the same rate as someone making $80,000 because everyone's income was rising, and so it was less of a big deal. You might agree with that. I actually kind of don't, but you can understand why people thought that. If you compare to our neighbors like Iowa and Wisconsin, which created their income taxes in 1911 and 1934, back when there was massive inequality, sound familiar? They saw that inequality and said, listen, there's a giant gap between the rich and the poor, we're going to ask the rich to pay more. And that's why they've always had fair income taxes, and we never have. The problem is that special interests and the very rich who benefit from our system were able, right after the income tax got created, to embed in 1970 in the Constitution a provision that says it's got to stay that way. And since then, inequality's gotten worse and worse and worse, and our tax code is stuck. Married to a 1970 economy we don't live in anymore. But this is not new. We could have had this conversation 20 years ago, and some people were, and most Democratic candidates for governor for a long time have said they were for fixing this. Democratic governors have for a long time said they were for fixing this. And if only we had all of my colleague Democratic candidates for governor up on the stage right now, actually it's fine that we don't, they would all say also that they're for changing this. But nobody ever does it. And partially that's because of who you piss off if you do it. Partially that's because of who pays for the campaigns. Partially that's because of who the sort of people who tend to be governor tend to be friends with. And partially it's because of exactly your question, which is that it takes a little bit of time. It's not the best way to feed the instant gratification monster. You can't start that project today and then have the state fixed tomorrow. But if you want to have the state fixed in 10 years, you can't not start the project today. And so I want you to watch very closely in this race, because it's a nuanced difference, but I think it's probably the most important difference of all in terms of who's actually going to make Illinois better. I would urge you to push hard to see how aggressively your gubernatorial candidate is promising to prioritize that. This is going to be something we can do if we're willing to put all our chips on the table and stake the governorship on doing it quickly. And if we do that, we'll be successful, and 10 years from now, Illinois will look completely different. But if the candidate for governor is like, well, this is one of the 12 things I want to do eventually, it won't happen. It just will not. And we'll be right back here having the same conversation with fewer people in 20 years because more people will have left. So how do you do it? We need 36 votes in the Senate, 71 votes in the House. Right now, we've got those 36 in the Senate. We've just got to keep them. We're not that far from having the 71 we need in the House. We're probably 5, 6, maybe 7 short. So what we need to do is 2 things. One that I can do is we've got to run on this. We shouldn't run away from this. We shouldn't do the Democrat thing of saying, I don't want to talk about taxes. We should do the sensible thing of saying, if you feel in Illinois like your taxes are unfair, that's because they are. They are, and we got to fix that. We got to fix that together by changing the Constitution. And number 2, we got to build a movement of people to demand it. We've got to build a movement of people prepared to write their state representatives and call their state representatives and explain to their friends and neighbors that the extremely dry, wonky, technical thing of we're going to amend the flat tax provision of the Constitution is in fact connected to the very bread and butter emotional issue of my taxes are too high and the billionaires are getting off paying nothing. Making that connection is going to be important because the public is overwhelmingly on our side once that connection is made, but people don't process their frustration about tax unfairness in the language of constitutional reform. So we've got to build a movement. And this campaign is about building a movement partially to elect me governor. Yes, I'm not going to lie about that.
but also to create the political power to enable these kinds of changes, simple changes, common sense changes, be like one of the other 46 states, not like one of the other 3 states changes that we have been stymied from enacting because we didn't have enough organized people working together and we had too much big money on the other side. Did you want to go next?
Oh, sure. You said something about Illinois being a blue state, which we know it is, but when you live in this part of the state, it doesn't necessarily feel very blue. I also point out that this whole stage today has been full of men and male candidates. And I know you can't change anything on that for me today to help me vote for you, but it's a matter of representation.
Yeah.
And how as a candidate would you stand up for women's rights, for women's well-being, access to health care, all the types of things that we see under attack, not just in a socially conservative area, but in an area where you have a little bit less access to the things you need to enact your rights.
It really upsets me. I think it's a real indication of a deep rot in our political system that we have, what is it up to now, 473 men running for governor and no women. I'm a 6'1", let's sort of pretend. I'm a 6'1" white guy with a fair amount of hair. And so when I walk into a room and say I'm running for governor, people say, yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. And when women say they're running for governor, people kind of cock their heads to the side and squint a little bit. When people of color say they're running for governor, the same thing happens. And so we have this giant field of men, not because women aren't willing to step up, in my opinion, but because women don't receive the kind of encouragement when they start thinking about stepping up that we, I believe, have a moral responsibility to provide if we're going to have a political system that works for everybody. So I feel you. And it's a weird thing for me to say, but I feel deeply uncomfortable and upset about it. And I think it's a real indictment of a very embedded problem in our system right now. Today is Women's Equality Day, August 26th. It's the 97th anniversary of the enactment of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Let's not pretend that no women had the right to vote before that. Some did. Let's not pretend that all women actually had a right to vote they could exercise after that, because lots didn't. There's a long arc to the women's movement. And the moment that we live in today on that issue of genuinely equal suffrage was a moment that was fought for gradually over the course of a long period of time with a lot of battles, many won, many lost. This is a moment of a new women's movement rising. And what I can say is that I see myself as an ally of that movement. I think I know my place in that movement, which is to say that I'm there to support and to work in the position that I have to empower women to be leaders in the movement. To understand that there's a lot of important stuff that happens when someone other than a white guy is the front of the parade. There was a group of advocates that designed a women's agenda in Springfield this session. And it was an appropriately broad agenda. It was about reproductive freedom and about equal pay. It was about family leave and about sick leave. It was about economic justice and social justice. And that was an agenda designed by women. It was an agenda that I was extraordinarily proud to play a role in helping to pass. There's a lot of bills, and so I got to have some, and lots of other people got to have lots. Jennifer Lee's in the front row, she seems happy about the situation. And so I think how to say this. I think we need to design a government that is built to break this problem. When I'm governor, I need to design my team, the people around me, the roles they have, who they are, what they look like, in a way that's specifically built to shatter this idea that men are supposed to be in control. That doesn't only mean what happens inside, it means who gets credit and when, and how people are spotlighted. It means who gets to have the ideas, and whose responsibility is sometimes just to listen and follow. And when it comes to the question we started with, the regional question, I don't dismiss the challenges, because there are real challenges. But I think you address the challenges by identifying the areas of agreement, of which there are so many. Equal pay is popular everywhere. Paid family leave is actually what the right should be fighting for. You're supposed to be for family values, but you don't think that someone should have the opportunity to spend time with their newborn? That's the Republican position. That's the Rauner position. Is don't you dare spend time with your newborn. Policies that raise wages disproportionately benefit women because women get pushed more into lower wage jobs, and careers that are historically female dominated have been, because of our institutional sexism, have they become lower paid careers. And so these economic justice issues that, by the way, we need to enact if we want to have a strong middle class, that, by the way, we need to enact if we want to reverse the decades-long lurching toward inequality, these are issues that should be a part of the Women's Coalition. And I'll just end by saying that it seems to me that the Democratic Party has kind of written a lot of Illinois off. In fact, I think the Democratic Party has written a lot of America off. And a lot of that's just for the ridiculous reason that the idea is we're going to go to places where there's a swing district right now, but we're not going to bother to invest where there isn't a swing district. What did I do? Yeah. We're not going to bother to invest in places where there isn't a swing district yet. If there's a district where we expect our candidate to only get 35% of the vote, but we have a talented candidate and she wants to go knock on doors, we're going to ignore her instead of saying, we'll support you, we'll help you recruit volunteers. Then you'll create a big group of volunteers, it'll be a big campaign family, and you'll go door to door and you'll spread a message, you'll listen to people, you'll communicate what you learn up the chain so the Democratic Party knows that your region of the state exists. And then you'll probably get 32% instead of 30. Or 37 instead of 35. Oh, but by the way, when the election's over, one of the people who knocked on doors with you is going to run for township trustee. And someone else is going to run for park board. And someone else is going to run an activist group to help fight a fight with the school board to change policy there and lift people up. And then you're building a little bit of a bench, and you've got some progressive energy on our side. And then in the next cycle, someone's going to run and get 2 more points. And again, and again, and a decade later, you've built yourself a swing district. That's how you make a party that competes everywhere, and that's how you make a party that listens everywhere. And once it's listening everywhere, its policies won't make people in part of the state feel like they're being left behind. You gotta do all of that. You've been very patient.
I worked in Russia for 8 years, and I have to admire you for taking on oligarchy. I have to question your wisdom in taking on 2 oligarchs. Do you believe that there's enough groundswell populist, progressive people out there that you're going to be able to persevere against these millions of dollars? I mean, I wish you the best. Do you, in your gut feeling, do you think the numbers are gelling towards you in spite of the fact that you're working against entrenchment?
You know, there's not a set of words that a candidate less wants to hear than I wish you the best but. The answer to your question is you bet. You bet. So let me tell you.
I know I keep saying how hard it is for me to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Donald Trump is the president, and Bruce Rauner is the governor. I think if ever we had an electorate that did not want to hear the argument of, listen, I don't have experience in government, but I've been really good at business, so trust me, it's going to be terrific. If ever there was an electorate prepared to reject that argument, it's the Illinois Democratic primary electorate. Wrong with that approach. And here's what I love about this movement. What I love about the Indivisible movement and the Action for Better Tomorrow groups and all the grassroots energy that's come up since the election. It's not just that people are mad. It's not just that people are scared. It's not just that people are upset. It's that people figured out that nobody's going to fix it for us. There is no knights on white horses. The cavalry's not coming. It's our job to fix it together. It's our job to coalesce around an aspirational progressive vision. It's our job to decide what we want our society to look like and then to make it happen. It's not going to be our billionaire taking out their billionaire if we want systemic change. And I think people feel it. And I think people sense it. I'm on the latter part of the 9th day of a 10-day tour across the state, the Road Forward Illinois tour. And we've had the most extraordinary time. We were a few nights ago in Bloomington, in the old McLean County Courthouse, in the top floor, in the most beautiful room you've seen. And it's just packed, standing room only, not because of my own whatever, just because people are hungry, people are ready, people understand what's at stake. And so is it daunting to go up against that many billionaires and that many nephews of presidents? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. I'm not a billionaire, I'm not a millionaire, I'm not a nephew of a president. I think my uncle would be a great president, actually. He doesn't seem interested. I don't know, I mean, he'd be really, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's possible that I'm a thousandaire, but it's also possible that I'm not a thousandaire. It kind of depends on the, you know, up to the minute home values. I'm almost sure I'm 100-aire at least. But I think the question is, what kind of party are we going to be? Are we going to be a billionaire party, or are we going to be a middle-class party? Are we going to be a corporate party, or are we going to be a people's party? I think that's a question that people are asking themselves right now. That fight is on, that battle is here, and this race is a litmus test moment to answer that question correctly. I remember back in December when Bruce Rauner wrote a $50 million check to his campaign. $15 million. And then in March, Chris Kennedy wrote a $250,000 check to his campaign, which would have sounded like a lot if not for $50 million. And then in April, J.B. Pritzker wrote a $7 million check to his campaign, and that got published online late on a Friday afternoon. $7 million. And so that Friday night, I went home, and my wife and I had a very, very depressing weekend. And we asked ourselves a lot of hard questions. Can we do it? Is it worth going on? Should we give up? But what does it mean if we give up? What does it mean for our party, and for our state, and for our country, and for the middle class? Are we having an election, or are we having an auction? And we decided it's just too important. It's just too important. And so we're in. We're in. And so I decided to do the same thing, and that Monday morning, I wrote my campaign a $25 check. Here's the thing. I didn't just write the check. Before I deposited it, I took a picture. I put the picture on Facebook. And it was like instantaneous. Instant. $25 contributions coming in online from all over the state. From every corner of Illinois. From people who, let's be honest, they didn't know who I was. They didn't know my position on 2/3 of the issue. They just felt in their bones what we feel in our bones. The system is not working for the rest of us. That the system is working for a few people who pay for the campaigns and run our government, and people I think right now are hungry to have a stake in a campaign, because that lets us know that we will own this government together. That's worth fighting for. That's what this campaign is about. think there was back there.
I'm the last one in here because I realize we've gone over time, and I don't know what you guys are going to be too. But you apparently do too.
I'll be here all night long.
Legalization.
So I'm guessing you're talking about marijuana.
Yes, I am.
Many things should be legal in my opinion.
I want to make sure that everybody who comes through here for governor answers that question. I think that our state would benefit from not spending money on putting people in jail for marijuana and making money from the taxes for it. I feel as though we should have some leadership from the top, and I'm curious how you respond to the question.
I appreciate it. I will answer the question in a very direct way. I just want to, I think you said that this last question, is that true?
Well, it was 5:20, and
Okay.
I think we're...
All right, so I'll wrap up. So I'll give a very simple answer. There's a bill to do that in the Senate, Senate Bill 316. I'm a co-sponsor today.
All right.
So let me tell you why. Our marijuana laws are not applied equally. They're not. If you're a poor black or brown kid and you're caught with a joint, that can change your whole life trajectory. I represent in my legislative district New Trier High School, a famous, rich, almost all white high school. And if a New Trier kid is caught with a joint, well, they actually don't ever get caught with a joint, it turns out. They don't even bother to try. It's just not something they focus on. And that level of injustice is, to me, the core reason. But next, I would say that my view that it should be legalized doesn't mean that I think marijuana is great for everybody. I think it, in fact, is a real public health problem. So it needs a public health solution, not a criminal solution. And finally, yes, if you legalized it, you would tax it. If you taxed it, the state would earn some revenue. Last I checked, the state could use the revenue. So I'm a believer, and I want to close by closing the answer, and then I'll just make a quick closing comment because I just can't stop myself because politicians, there are voices, you know how it is. I want to close this by saying I really agree with the framing of your question. This is an issue where the politicians are miles behind the public. Miles behind the public. It's time for the politicians to catch up. So I just want to close by, again, thanking you guys for the work that you do to be a part of this resistance. I want to close by thanking you for including me in this. We have so much to do, and there's so much that a state could do to be in the forefront of the resistance. On healthcare, the way Governor Rauner is just hidden in the corner and chosen not to be a part of it. Protection of LGBT youth, where Rauner is just scared to even talk about it. Yes, on environmental issues. One of the first things I did this session was I put in a bill that says that you can't appear on the ballot for president unless you've released 5 years of tax returns. We know that Governor Rauner wouldn't sign that bill, and so we can't do that right now. And so these are groups that were formed by a hunger to resist. And it is awesome that you had all these congressional candidates on the stage, and I sure as heck hope that 3 of them win in November, or 3 people like them. Oh, really? Sorry. Well, let's not just the Chicago way, let's say 2. But I want us to spend some time thinking as well about the role that the state government can play in the resistance, because in this moment where, God forbid, Trump still is the president, and at least for now, Ryan is the speaker and McConnell is the leader of the Senate, the state is the first line of defense. The state is in some sense the place of greatest opportunity for the resistance. And a big state that's supposed to be blue, like Illinois, should be leading that resistance, but Rauner has put us in the back of the parade. And so this is a campaign about enabling us to take our rightful position in the forefront of resistance with states across the union that are doing so much more. And it's about righting the wrongs that got us to this place where Illinois has a government that does not work for most of us. And that's something that's been the case for a very long time. There's a lot that I want to do we haven't even gotten into. On healthcare, on education, big, bold ideas. But if we just start by fixing our tax code and fixing our school funding system, not incrementally, not a little bit, but the way they really ought to be, we will have changed the trajectory of economic opportunity for generations of Illinoisans.
it's worth fighting for. This is the moment to get it right. This is a moment of choice for the Democratic Party. This is a moment for us to decide who we're going to be. I'm running for governor because I think if we seize this moment, we will be grateful, and our children will be grateful, and our grandchildren will be grateful. I'm asking you to join me in this campaign. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you to all the candidates. Thank you to Senator Daniel Biss for coming and speaking to everybody. I'd like to end, before we go, to remind everyone that tomorrow is his birthday. So if you can join me in singing happy birthday to... Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday.